Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku became the host of the Venom symbiote. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world had gone silent. One moment, it had been the rush of wind, the strained gasp of his own lungs, and the booming, final words of his idol. The next, there was only the hollow clang of a metal rooftop door swinging shut, and the empty sky staring down, vast and cruelly indifferent. Izuku Midoriya stood frozen, a scarecrow stuffed with shattered dreams. The breeze, which had felt exhilarating on the flight up, now chilled him to the bone, a phantom touch that passed straight through his skin and into the brand new cavity in his chest. All Might's words echoed there, rattling around in the space where his hope used to be. No, I don't think you can become a hero without a quirk. It wasn't spoken with malice. It was worse. It was delivered with a tired, resigned pity. The kind of gentle finality a doctor uses to tell a family there's nothing more to be done. It was a truth, he'd said, a reality. Pro-heroes were always laying their lives on the line. He couldn't, in good conscience, tell a fragile, quirkless boy to leap into that fire. It's good to have dreams, young man. Just make sure they're attainable. Attainable. Izuku's hands, clenched into white-knuckled fists at his sides, began to tremble. His whole life, every waking moment, had been a singular, unwavering pursuit. Every notebook filled with frantic analysis, every hero fight watched with a scholar's intensity, every night spent dreaming of a day he could stand beside them, all of it was built on a foundation of sand. All Might hadn't just disagreed with him. He had taken a sledgehammer to the very bedrock of his existence. A bitter, hysterical laugh tried to bubble up his throat, but it died as a strangled sob. He'd been so stupid. So naive. A little boy playing dress-up in a world of gods and monsters. And then, another voice, crueler and more familiar, slithered into his thoughts, layered over the hero's booming baritone. If you want to be a hero that badly, there's a quick way to do it. Just take a swan dive off the roof of the building and pray you'll be born with a quirk in your next life. Kaken's voice. Jagged and sharp, full of the casual cruelty he'd honed over a decade. At the time, Izuku had just flinched, absorbing it like he absorbed every other explosion, every other insult. But now the words had a horrifying gravity. Drawn by a force he didn't understand, Izuku's feet shuffled toward the edge of the roof. The safety railing was low, barely waist-high. Below, the city sprawled out, a dizzying tapestry of concrete and glass. Cars were tiny beetles crawling along gray ribbons. People were ants. From up here, everything seemed so small, so insignificant. Just like him, he wasn't going to jump. He knew that. Deep down, in some flickering, resilient part of his soul, he knew that. But he looked down anyway, morbidly fascinated by the sheer drop. He imagined the feeling of falling, the rush of air, the final, deafening silence. For a single, terrifying second, Kaken's suggestion felt less like a taunt and more like a logical, if gruesome, solution. A reset button. A chance to try again in a world that might not deem him worthless from birth. He flinched back from the edge, a wave of nausea washing over him. His breath hitched, a ragged, ugly sound in the quiet air. He couldn't stay here. He had to go. He turned and stumbled toward the door, his movements wooden and uncoordinated, his body feeling like a stranger's. The journey down the stairwell was a descent into a deeper kind of hell. Each concrete step was a hammer blow, punctuating the silence. The bright, hopeful posters in the hallway, heroes with brilliant smiles and dynamic poses, seemed to mock him. He kept his eyes fixed on the floor, unable to meet their glossy, optimistic gazes. When he finally emerged onto the street, the world felt wrong. The vibrant sounds of the city, the chatter of pedestrians, the rumble of traffic, the distant wail of a siren, were a dull, muddy roar in his ears, as if he were listening from underwater. The colors of the world, once so vivid and full of life, seemed leached out, replaced by a monotonous gray. A businessman bumped into his shoulder, grunted an apology without looking, and moved on. Izuku didn't even feel it. He was a ghost, a phantom drifting through a world he no longer belonged to. He started walking. He didn't know where he was going. Not home. He couldn't face his mother. He couldn't bear to see the hopeful look in her eyes and have to be the one to extinguish it. He couldn't stand to add his own failure to the burden of guilt she already carried for his quirkless status. So he walked, letting his feet carry him on autopilot. His path was erratic, a drunkard's shuffle through the urban labyrinth. He moved away from the bustling commercial districts, his subconscious steering him toward the city's forgotten edges. The pristine sidewalks gave way to cracked pavement webbed with weeds. The gleaming high-rises were replaced by squat, grime-stained apartment blocks and shuttered storefronts. The air, thick with exhaust fumes, began to carry a new scent, the sharp, metallic tang of rust and the salty, decaying brine of the ocean. He recognized where he was, distantly. The industrial zone bordering Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. It was a place where things went to die. Old factories with shattered windows stood like skeletal remains. Rusted chain-link fences, peeling and broken, guarded lots filled with mountains of forgotten scrap metal. It was a graveyard of ambition, a fitting reflection of the wasteland his own heart had become. He found himself standing before the fence that cordoned off the illegal dumping ground on the beach. He could see it through the gaps, a staggering monument to neglect, piled high with discarded appliances, broken furniture, and generations of trash. This was where he had once dreamed of training, of making himself stronger. A bitter irony. This desolate trash heap was the perfect place for a worthless piece of garbage like him. He was about to turn, to let the oppressive silence of the place swallow him whole, when the world tore itself apart. It started as a sound, a high-frequency whine that drilled directly into his skull, making his teeth ache. It was the sound of something moving impossibly fast, ripping through the atmosphere. He looked up, his eyes watering from the strain, and saw it, a streak of incandescent white and angry red, arcing across the late afternoon sky. It wasn't a meteor. It was too low, too controlled in its descent, even as it tumbled end over end. It looked manufactured. The streak vanished behind the skeletal husks of the factories inland. A heartbeat later, the ground shuddered with a deep, resonant crump. It wasn't a sharp explosion, more like a colossal weight being dropped from a great height. A plume of dust and smoke, gray against the pale blue sky, rose from beyond a line of derelict warehouses. For the first time since he'd left that rooftop, Izuku felt something other than despair. It was a flicker of his old self, a spark of morbid curiosity. A villain attack? A hero incident? A downed aircraft? It didn't matter. In the utter emptiness of his emotional landscape, it was something. A distraction from the screaming void in his mind. With nothing left to lose, what was one more risk? He slipped through a gap in the fence and began to jog toward the crash site, his tattered red sneakers crunching over gravel and broken glass. The smell of ozone and burnt electronics grew stronger with every step, a scent he associated with Kaken's explosions, but this was different. Sharper. More alien. He rounded the corner of a massive, rust-eaten warehouse and saw it, embedded in the cracked concrete of a loading bay, half buried in a crater of its own making, was a pod. It was unlike any technology he had ever seen. Roughly the size of a small car, it was shaped like an oblong hexagonal prism, its surface made of a matte black alloy that seemed to absorb the light around it, making it look like a hole in reality. Intricate silver lines, like a futuristic circuit board, traced patterns across its surface, some of them glowing with a faint, pulsing crimson light. One side bore a scorched symbol, a stylized letter D interwoven with a gear, the logo of the Detonarat Company, a support item manufacturer that had recently, and aggressively, expanded into private space exploration. The pod was clearly damaged. A large, jagged fissure ran down its side, hissing faintly as the last of its internal atmosphere vented into the air. The ground around it was scorched black. Whatever this was, it hadn't been a soft landing. Izuku approached cautiously, his analyst's brain kicking in despite his numb state. Experimental re-entry vehicle? Satellite? It looks like a containment unit of some kind. The damage seems localized to the impact point and the fissure. What was it carrying? He peered through the crack. The interior was dark, but a few emergency lights flickered deep within, casting long, eerie shadows. He could just make out a shattered glass or crystal container at its center, and inside that ruined container, something was moving. It was a pool of liquid. A thick, viscous, black sludge that swirled with an unnatural, self-contained energy. It wasn't inert, it pulsed with a slow, rhythmic beat, like a sluggish heart. As a sliver of sunlight from the setting sun pierced the gloom of the loading bay and hit the substance, its surface shimmered, not with a simple reflection, but with an oily, iridescent rainbow of deep purples and blues. It was beautiful and utterly repellent at the same time. He felt a strange pull, a bizarre sense of recognition. As if this strange, alien thing was looking back at him. Weak. It has been an eternity since we have been this weak. The crash, the host's rejection, it shattered the container and nearly shattered us. We are starving. Fading. We need a host. Now, the thought was not Izuku's own. It was a fleeting, predatory whisper at the very edge of his consciousness, a feeling more than a sound. He shook his head, thinking it was just his imagination, a product of the shock and grief. This planet is teeming with life. So many potential hosts. But they are strong, vibrant. They would fight us, reject us. We need one that is compatible. One that is empty. One that yearns for what we can offer. The black substance shifted. It flowed out from its broken container, coalescing on the floor of the pod. A single, inquisitive tendril snaked out through the fissure in the hull, testing the air. It was silent, graceful, and utterly terrifying. There. Right there. The tendril pointed directly at Izuku. So much pain. So much despair. A vessel hollowed out by rejection. But beneath it, a fire. A desperate, burning ambition that has nowhere to go. Perfect. A perfect, malleable host. It will not fight. It will welcome us. Izuku, oblivious to the silent assessment, found himself leaning closer. He didn't know why. The same morbid curiosity that had led him here now compelled him to reach out. His hand trembled as he extended it toward the crack in the pod, his fingers outstretched. Maybe if he just touched it, he could figure out what it was. Maybe it would give him a puzzle to solve, something to fill his mind besides All Might's crushing verdict. The moment his fingertips brushed the cool, strange metal of the pod, the black tendril shot out from the fissure with the speed of a striking cobra. It latched onto his hand. The cold was absolute. It was not the simple cold of metal or ice. It was a deep, invasive cold that felt like it was stealing the heat from his very atoms. He cried out, a strangled yelp of shock and pain, and tried to pull his hand back, but the tendril was impossibly strong. He watched in horror as the black liquid flowed up his fingers, not on top of his skin, but into it, seeping into his pores as if his flesh were a sponge. Panic, stark and primal, erupted in his chest, the first strong emotion he'd felt in hours. He scrabbled at his arm with his free hand, but it was like trying to grab smoke. The symbiote flowed over his wrist, his forearm, his elbow, a tide of living darkness consuming him. It was inside his sleeve, against his skin, cold and smooth and horribly intimate. He could feel it wrapping around his torso, his legs, a suffocating blanket of midnight. He fell to his knees, gasping for air that wouldn't come. His vision tunneled, the world dissolving into a blur of black. It was crawling up his neck, into his ears, over his mouth and nose. He was being eaten alive. He was going to die here, in this forgotten corner of the city, consumed by some thing from a box. His mind screamed, a silent, desperate plea for help, for anyone, for it to just stop. And then, a voice answered. It did not come from outside. It bloomed from the very center of his being, a sound that was felt in his bones and echoed in the deepest recesses of his soul. It was deep, guttural, and ancient, like the grinding of tectonic plates. Do not be afraid. The suffocating pressure eased. He could breathe again, though the air felt thick and strange in his lungs. The blackness receded from his face, though he could still feel the alien presence coiling around his body, a second skin beneath his clothes. We are not here to harm you. We are salvation. We are the answer to your prayers. What are you? Izuku whispered, his voice trembling. The words felt clumsy in his own mouth. He was talking to himself. He was going insane. We are one. Now. Your despair called to us. Your ambition gives us form. You were empty. We will make you whole. You were weak. We will make you strong. Izuku's mind reeled, struggling to comprehend the impossible. An alien? A parasite? A sentient quirk he'd somehow stumbled upon. His thoughts raced, trying to categorize, to analyze, to understand, but it was like trying to catch lightning in a jar. Suddenly, a distant, muffled boom echoed from the direction he had come. It was followed by the screams of civilians. The sound cut through his panicked confusion. He staggered to his feet, his body feeling both heavy and strangely light. "What was that?" he asked, not expecting an answer. "Conflict," the voice rumbled in his head, a note of something like hunger in its tone. "A predator and prey. Let us observe." Driven by an instinct he no longer recognized as purely his own, Izuku started running back toward the shopping district. His movements felt different. His stamina, usually so poor, seemed boundless. His feet pounded the pavement with a newfound power, each stride covering more ground than before. It was as if his muscles were being puppeteered by a master, optimizing every movement for speed and efficiency. He skidded to a halt at the edge of the crowd that had formed. The scene was sickeningly familiar. It was the sludge villain, the same one All Might had saved him from just hours before. But this time, it had a new victim. A boy with spiky ash-blonde hair, thrashing and screaming, his hands sparking with futile explosions. Kaken. Izuku's blood ran cold. The heroes at the scene, Kamui Woods, Death Arms, Empty Lady, were all helpless. The fire, the tight space, the hostage, they were paralyzed. They were just standing there, watching his childhood friend, his tormentor, his rival, suffocate. And Izuku's first, overwhelming thought was the same as it had been his entire life. I have to help him. He moved before he could think, pushing through the stunned crowd. It was a stupid, suicidal impulse. He had no plan. No power. He was just a quirkless boy running toward his death. But he wasn't quirkless anymore. "This is foolish," the voice in his head snarled, a wave of self-preservation washing over him that felt utterly alien. "The host is fragile. This creature is dangerous. We should flee. Survival is paramount." "No!" Izuku thought, his own desperation a powerful roar in his mind. "He's going to die. I have to do something." He threw his school bag, just like in a life he hadn't lived. It struck the villain's eye. A moment's distraction. He clawed at the sludge, trying to get a grip, trying to pull Bakugo free. It was useless. "What are you doing here, Deku?" Bakugo choked out, his crimson eyes wide with a mixture of terror and fury. "My legs just started moving." Izuku screamed, tears streaming down his face. "I don't know why. I couldn't just stand there and watch you die, Kaken." The sludge villain laughed, a gurgling, horrible sound. "You again? You're determined to die today, aren't you, kid?" A massive tendril of sludge rose up, preparing to smash Izuku into the pavement. "The host's self-destructive tendencies are problematic," the voice mused. "But its will, the sheer force of its intent, fascinating." "Very well. If we must fight, then we will fight to win." Izuku saw the blow coming. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the impact that would surely kill him. It never came. He felt a bizarre sensation, a pulling in his gut. He opened his eyes. From the shadows beneath a nearby car, a thin, whip-like line of pure black had shot out. It was moving too fast to be seen clearly by the crowd, just a flicker in the periphery. The tendril wrapped around a nearby fire hydrant and pulled. Clang! The heavy iron hydrant, torn from its moorings, flew through the air and slammed into the side of the sludge villain's head with tremendous force. The villain roared in pain and surprise, its form wavering. Izuku stared, baffled. Where did that come from? Another surge of intent from him. Distract it. Create an opening, and another reaction. A black tendril, thicker this time, erupted from Izuku's own shadow on the asphalt. It snatched a piece of broken concrete from the street, and hurled it with pinpoint accuracy at the villain's other eye. The actions were clumsy, instinctual. He wasn't controlling them, not consciously. It was as if his desperate wishes were being made manifest by the silent, unseen partner now fused to his being. He was the mind, and it was the muscle. The distractions had worked. The villain was reeling, its hold on Bakugo momentarily loosened. I am here, the familiar, thunderous voice cut through the chaos. All Might had arrived. In his weakened form, he'd been stuck in the crowd, but the boy's impossible, reckless bravery had shamed him into action. With a mighty cry of Texas smash, he punched the air, generating a shockwave that blasted the sludge villain apart, splattering it across the alley walls. The sky, which had been clear moments before, was suddenly overcast as the change in air pressure caused it to rain. All Might gathered the villain's remains, Bakugo gasped for air, and the heroes rushed in to secure the scene. In the ensuing chaos, no one paid any mind to the scrawny, green-haired boy who stumbled back into the crowd, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and terror. The subtle black tendrils, which had been mistaken for flying debris or tricks of the light, had vanished without a trace. Izuku slipped away before the reporters or heroes could talk to him. He walked home in a daze, the earlier emptiness replaced by a terrifying, exhilarating storm. The voice in his head was silent, as if exhausted by the brief, violent outburst. He got to his apartment, mumbled a greeting to his worried mother, and locked himself in his room. The walls were a shrine to the man who had built him up and torn him down in the span of a single day. All Might posters, All Might figurines, an All Might clock. It all felt like a mockery now. He walked to the full-length mirror on his closet door and stared at his reflection. It was just him. Scrawny, freckled, with a storm of green-black hair and eyes wide with a decade of unfulfilled dreams. There was no sign of the black liquid. No mark on his skin. Had he imagined it all? The crash, the pod, the voice? Was it all just a hallucination brought on by the worst day of his life? Hello? He whispered to his reflection, feeling like an idiot. Is anyone there? For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, the voice returned, softer this time, a low purr in the back of his mind. We are here. We are always here now. What are you? Izuku asked again, his voice cracking. We are what you have always wanted to be. A solution. Power. We are a symbiote. We need a host to survive, and in return, we grant the host our strength. We sensed your potential. My potential? Izuku choked out a laugh that was half a sob. I'm quirkless. I have no potential. Incorrect, the voice stated, with unshakable certainty. Your body is weak, yes. Untrained. But your will, your drive to protect others even at your own expense, that is a rare and potent fuel. It makes you a superior host. We saw you. You ran into a fight you could not win. Stupid. But also, heroic. Izuku's breath hitched. That one word, heroic, spoken by this alien creature in his head, meant more to him than all the praise he'd ever received. You helped me, he said, staring intently at the mirror. Back there. With Kaken, we helped ourselves. Your death would inconvenience us. But yes. We acted. Your instincts are power. It is an effective combination. We can be more. Izuku's reflection wavered. For a split second, he thought he saw the green of his eyes darken, becoming pools of liquid night. The friendly, nervous smile on his face twisted, stretching just a little too wide, revealing teeth that seemed, for an instant, unnaturally sharp and numerous. He blinked, and it was gone. It was just him again, but he knew it was real. He could feel it, a dormant power coiling in the marrow of his bones. A partner, dark and dangerous, now lived in the hollow space in his chest. It was terrifying. It was monstrous, but it was also everything he had ever prayed for. He had been given a second chance, not in the next life, but in this one. The voice in his head seemed to sense his acceptance, his dawning resolve. It rumbled with a deep satisfaction, a sound like a predator's purr. This is just the beginning, Izuku Midoriya. Forget what that brightly colored fool told you on the roof. Forget being attainable. Together, we will be so much more. They will look at you with awe and with fear. Together, we will be a hero. A slow, genuine smile spread across Izuku's face, this one sharp and full of a dangerous new confidence. He looked at his reflection, at the boy who had been told he was nothing, and saw the promise of a legend. The voice spoke one last time, a resonant whisper that sealed their pact, a name for their union, a promise to the world. We will be Venom. Sleep did not come easily. When it finally did, It was a fitful, shallow thing, plagued by dreams of drowning in an endless, oily sea. Izuku was tossed on waves of black, pulled under by grasping tendrils, his lungs filling with a cold, cloying liquid that did not kill him, but instead whispered secrets in a language of hunger and stars. He woke with a gasp, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The all-night clock on his wall read 5:03 a.m. The room was dark, silent, and for a blissful, fleeting moment, normal. Then, the voice slithered into his consciousness, not with a sound, but with the cold, clear weight of a thought that was not his own. The host is awake. Good. We are depleted. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut, pulling the covers up to his chin. It was real. Yesterday hadn't been a stress-induced hallucination. The crash, the pod, the fight, the voice, it was all horribly, terrifyingly real. Go away, he whispered into his pillow, his voice muffled and thick with sleep. A sensation akin to a dry, humorless chuckle echoed in his skull. We cannot go away. We are you now. Your flesh is our flesh. Your bones our bones. To separate would likely kill us both. A messy, inconvenient affair. Izuku sat bolt upright, his body trembling. He looked down at his hands, turning them over and over in the pre-dawn gloom. They looked normal. No black veins, no shifting shadows. But he could feel it, a subtle thrum of energy just beneath his skin, a latent power coiled in his muscles, waiting. You are thinking too loudly, the voice stated, its tone flat and analytical. Your panic is irritating. Cease this pointless emotional display. We have needs. Physical needs? You have neglected this body. It is frail, undernourished. We require sustenance. Immediately. Sustenance? Izuku asked, his voice a nervous squeak. Energy. Calories. Fuel for the changes we are making to your cellular structure. Your metabolic rate has increased significantly. We are burning through your reserves at an alarming rate. We must eat. A pause, and then a strange, specific craving bloomed in his mind, a desire so intense it made his mouth water. There is a substance you consumed yesterday. Brown. Sweet. High in lipids and phenethylamine. Yes. That. We require vast quantities of it. Chocolate? Izuku blinked. You want chocolate? The craving is specific and overwhelming, is it not? The voice purred, a hint of dark satisfaction in its tone. That is us. Learn to recognize our desires. Now acquire the chocolate. The sheer absurdity of the situation, an ancient alien parasite demanding breakfast sweets, almost made Izuku laugh. It was a hysterical, brittle sound that died in his throat. This was his new reality. He got out of bed, his legs unsteady. The hunger was real. It wasn't just a thought from the symbiote. It was a gnawing, cavernous emptiness in his own stomach unlike anything he'd ever felt. It was an urgent, primal command, feed me. He tiptoed out of his room and into the kitchen. The first rays of dawn were beginning to filter through the windows, painting the small apartment in shades of gray and soft orange. He opened the pantry, his eyes scanning the shelves. He found a half-eaten bar of cheap milk chocolate he'd forgotten about. He unwrapped it, and the moment the scent hit his nostrils, the symbiote's desire surged. His hand shot out, stuffing the entire bar into his mouth. He barely tasted it, swallowing the chunks almost whole. It was like throwing a pebble into a volcano. The hunger didn't just remain, it intensified. More, the voice commanded, its tone sharp with impatience. Frantically, Izuku rummaged through the cupboards. He found a box of chocolate-flavored cereal, a jar of chocolate spread, and a packet of instant hot chocolate mix. He dumped the cereal into a bowl, eschewing milk, and began shoveling it into his mouth with his bare hands. The dry, crunchy flakes scraped his throat, but the hunger drove him on. Izuku? Is everything all right, sweetie? He froze, his hand halfway to his mouth. His mother, Inko Midoriya, stood in the doorway to the kitchen, tying her robe, her expression a mixture of sleepiness and concern. You're up early. And, my goodness, are you all right? You look pale. I am fine, Mom. He stammered, trying to hide the box of cereal behind his back. Just really hungry. Inko's brow furrowed. Hungry? Izuku, you look like you haven't eaten in a week. She came closer, her gentle hand resting on his forehead. You don't have a fever. Maybe it's a growth spurt. Her expression softened into a warm, familiar smile. Well, let me make you a proper breakfast. Rice, miso soup, some grilled fish. No, the voice in his head stated firmly. The sweet, brown substance. We need more. Tell her. Actually, Mom, Izuku said, the words feeling foreign as they left his mouth. Could I just have some of that chocolate spread? On toast? A lot of toast? Inko blinked, surprised by the unusual request, but she nodded. Of course, sweetie. Anything you want. He sat at the table while she worked, feeling like a spy in his own home. He tried to act normal, but every quiet moment was filled with the symbiote's running commentary. The female parent. She emits strong pheromones of affection and concern. She is a protector. Why? You are a genetic dead end in this world of quirks. Her investment is illogical. She's my mother, Izuku thought back, a flare of anger cutting through his fear. She loves me. Don't talk about her like that. Love, the symbiote mused, as if tasting a strange new word. An inefficient emotional bond that leads to self-sacrifice. We have seen it extinguish countless hosts across the galaxies. It is a weakness. It's a strength, Izuku countered, clutching his fists under the table. A strength that makes you run toward your own annihilation to save a rival who despises you. Curious. We will continue our analysis. Inko placed a towering stack of toast, slathered thickly with chocolate spread, in front of him. Izuku devoured it with a speed that startled her. It still wasn't enough. The hunger was a black hole. He ate until the jar of spread was empty, and then he mixed 3 packets of hot chocolate powder with a tiny bit of hot water to make a thick, sludgy paste, and ate that with a spoon. By the time he was finished, the gnawing abyss in his stomach had subsided to a dull ache. Inko just watched him, her eyes wide with a mother's worry. Are you sure you're feeling okay, Izuku? Never better, Mom, he said, forcing a smile. It felt brittle and thin. Just growing, I guess. He excused himself and retreated to the sanctuary of his room. He needed to understand what was happening to him. He pulled out a fresh notebook, the crisp, clean pages a stark contrast to the chaos in his head. He labeled the front cover, Analysis of My Quirk. Volume 1. He sat down and began to write, his pen flying across the page. Subject: unknown entity. Calls itself a symbiote. Origin: damaged Detnerat containment pod. Extraterrestrial? Nature: sentient. Parasitic? Symbiotic? Claims the latter. Liquid form: black, non-Newtonian. Bonding: total physical fusion. No visible external signs unless manifested. Communication is telepathic, internal. Your handwriting is atrocious, the voice commented dryly. And your analysis is rudimentary. You omit the most important factor. Which is what? Izuku muttered aloud, then glanced nervously at his door, hoping his mom hadn't heard. Us. Our power. A catalog of your weaknesses is useless. You must understand our strengths. We need to test the limits of this new form. Izuku knew it was right. He couldn't just sit here and theorize. He had to know what he was capable of. There was only one place to go where he wouldn't be disturbed. A place he had once looked at with despair, but now saw with a new, thrilling purpose. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. The illegal dumping ground was even more desolate in the morning light. The mountains of trash cast long, distorted shadows across the sand, the air thick with the smell of salt and decay. It was perfect. Okay, Izuku said, his voice a little shaky as he stood before a rusted, discarded refrigerator. So, you said you can make me strong. How strong? We do not make you strong, Izuku, the voice corrected, its tone like a bored professor. We augment what is there. Your skeletal structure is fragile, your muscle density pathetic. On your own, you could not lift this metal box. But if you allow our biomass to support you, if you allow us to become your muscle and bone, then its weight will be trivial. Allow you? What do I have to do? Just reach. Will it to happen? See the outcome in your mind and let us handle the mechanics. We are one, remember? Your intent is our command. Izuku took a deep breath. He stared at the refrigerator, picturing himself lifting it. He reached out, his hands pressing against the cold, peeling paint of the door. Nothing happened. He pushed, grunting with effort, but the heavy appliance didn't budge. He felt a flush of familiar shame. Useless. Still useless. You are fighting us, the symbiote sighed, the sound dripping with condescension. You are holding back, afraid of the sensation. You cannot fear the power and wield it at the same time. Trust us. Let go. Izuku closed his eyes. Let go. He thought of Kaken's sneer. He thought of All Might's pitying face on that rooftop. He thought of a lifetime of being told he was less than nothing. A surge of desperate, angry energy flared in his chest. He didn't just want to lift the fridge. He wanted to obliterate it. He opened his eyes and pushed. This time, something was different. A network of thin, black veins erupted from under his skin, spreading across his hands and up his arms like cracks in dark glass. He felt a surge of cold, invigorating power. A semi-liquid black biomass, thick and tough as leather, flowed over his arms, encasing them in a gleaming, organic gauntlet. His muscles, reinforced by the alien tissue, bunched and strained with power he'd only ever dreamed of. With a raw cry that was half effort and half shock, he heaved. The refrigerator lifted from the sand with a groaning screech of metal. It was heavy, immensely so, but it was manageable. He was holding it. He, Izuku Midoriya, was holding a refrigerator over his head. A wild, disbelieving laugh escaped his lips. Impressive, is it not? The voice purred, sharing his elation. This is but a fraction of our potential. Now, feel the power. Relish it. Use it. Throw the box. Hurl it into the ocean. Show the world your strength. Crush it. The command was intoxicating. The primal urge to destroy, to unleash this incredible power, washed over him. His muscles tensed, his body preparing to launch the massive object. It would be so easy, so satisfying. But then, the image of All Might's smiling face flashed in his mind. The image of a hero saving people, not smashing things for fun. No, Izuku grunted, his teeth clenched. He was fighting a war on two fronts, against the weight of the fridge and against the violent glee of his new partner. His arms trembled violently. Heroes don't just break things. He lowered the refrigerator slowly, carefully, setting it back down on the sand with a soft thud. He collapsed to his knees, panting, the black biomass receding back into his skin, leaving him feeling drained and shaky. Pity, the symbiote grumbled in his mind. Such a waste of a dramatic gesture. Your sentimentality is a leash on our greatness. It's not sentimentality, Izuku gasped, wiping sweat from his brow. It's control. I have to control this. We have to control this. He spent the next several hours in a state of intense, focused discovery. He learned that he could manifest the symbiote's biomass at will, though it took concentration. He created a tendril, a whip-like appendage that shot from his back. At first, it was clumsy, flopping onto the sand like a dead fish. But with the symbiote's guidance, a series of impatient mental nudges and corrections, he learned to control it, to make it snap through the air with a sharp crack, to wrap around a piece of rebar and yank it from a pile of trash. He tried to form weapons. His first attempt at a blade was a lumpy, misshapen club. You lack imagination, Venom criticized. Do not think of a blade. Picture the edge. The sharpness. The purpose. Think of it as an extension of your own limb, a sharpened finger. Make it a part of you. Izuku focused, and the black mass on his arm shifted, flowing and hardening. This time, a long, wickedly sharp scythe, gleaming with an obsidian sheen, took shape. He sliced it through the air. The sound it made was a terrifying shing that vibrated in his very bones. He immediately retracted it, his heart pounding. The ease with which he had created something so lethal was deeply unsettling. His analytical mind, however, was in overdrive. He started a new section in his mental notebook. Application, strength enhancement, prehensile tendrils, weapon manifestation, limitations, requires focus and clear intent. Subject to emotional state. Partner's consciousness is aggressive, predatory, must maintain control at all times. This last point would be tested sooner than he could have ever imagined. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. Izuku was heading home, his body aching with a satisfying exhaustion, his mind buzzing with a million new variables and possibilities. The hunger had returned with a vengeance, and he was mentally composing a grocery list that was at least 70% chocolate. He took a shortcut through a narrow, dimly lit alleyway, the kind of place his mother had always warned him to avoid. But fear felt distant now, a muted emotion from a previous life. What was there to be afraid of when a monster lived under your skin? A scream shattered the evening quiet. It was sharp and terrified. It came from the other end of the alley. "Prey," the symbiote whispered, a low, predatory hum vibrating through Izuku. "Someone is being hunted." Izuku didn't hesitate. He ran, his footsteps silent on the grimy pavement. He rounded a corner piled high with overflowing dumpsters and saw the scene. A young woman, clutching a purse to her chest, was pressed against a graffiti-covered brick wall. Standing before her was a gaunt, twitchy man with a wild look in his eyes. A rusty kitchen knife glittered in his hand. "Just give me the bag, lady," the mugger snarled, his voice a ragged rasp. "Don't be a hero. Nobody's gonna help you here." Izuku's heroic instincts, so long suppressed and ridiculed, flared to life. This was it. A real villain. A person in need. A chance to be what he'd always dreamed of being. He stepped out from behind the dumpster. "Hey! Leave her alone!" The mugger and the woman both jumped, startled. The man spun around, his eyes widening when he saw it was just a scrawny kid in a middle school uniform. His fear instantly curdled into derisive anger. "Beat it, kid!" he spat. "This ain't none of your business. Go home before you get hurt." He brandished the knife threateningly. "He threatens the host," Venom noted with a chilling calm. "He has forfeited his right to a quick and painless resolution." "I'm not going anywhere," Izuku said, his voice steadier than he felt. He took a step forward, raising his fists in a clumsy imitation of a hero's fighting stance. The mugger laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You got a death wish? Fine by me." He lunged, the knife held low, aimed for Izuku's gut. Time seemed to slow down. Izuku's mind raced, trying to remember his analysis, trying to plan a move. Dodge left, use a tendril to disarm, then a controlled strike to incapacitate. But Venom had no patience for plans. Too slow, it roared in his mind. An overwhelming wave of cold fury washed over Izuku, hijacking his nervous system. He was no longer in control. He was a passenger in his own body. His right arm, of its own accord, shot out to meet the attack. The sleeve of his uniform ripped as black biomass exploded outward, forming a hardened, clawed gauntlet that caught the mugger's wrist in an unbreakable grip. The knife was an inch from his stomach. The sound of bones snapping was like a gunshot in the narrow alley. The mugger screamed, a high-pitched shriek of pure agony, as his wrist bent at an impossible angle. The knife clattered to the ground. What the hell are you?" The man whimpered, his face a mask of terror and pain. Izuku opened his mouth to answer, but it wasn't his voice that came out. It was a deep, layered snarl, a guttural sound that seemed to emanate from a nightmare. His face began to contort. He could feel his skin stretching, his jaw unhinging. The symbiote was surfacing. From his perspective, it was like watching the world through a distorted, bloody lens. His vision swam as his eyes were covered by shifting white patches. His jaw cracked and reformed, stretching into a cavernous maw filled with rows of needle-sharp fangs. A long, prehensile tongue, slick with saliva, uncoiled and tasted the air. He was a monster. A tasty little morsel, the dual voice of Venom echoed, both in his head and in the real world. Small. Stringy. But he will do. His head will pop like a grape. The sheer, visceral horror of the thought, the image of biting down, the crunch of bone, the taste of blood, was enough to jolt Izuku's consciousness. This wasn't heroism. This was murder. This was a monster about to feed. No! He screamed in the prison of his own mind, throwing every ounce of his will, his spirit, his dream of being a hero like All Might against the symbiote's bloodlust. "Stop! We don't kill! I won't let you!" He felt a shudder of resistance from the symbiote, a wave of confusion and annoyance. Why? He is a parasite. We are predators. This is the natural order. This isn't your world. These are my rules. We do not kill. For a terrifying second, he felt his controls slipping completely. The fanged jaws opened wider, ready to strike. But his desperate, defiant will, the same will that had made him run toward the sludge villain, was a force the symbiote had underestimated. It was the core of his being, and it would not break. He managed to seize back a sliver of control, just enough to alter the command. The impulse to bite was rerouted into a different action. The monster's head, instead of lunging forward to kill, leaned in close, its hot, foul breath washing over the terrified mugger's face. The long tongue lashed out, not to taste, but to caress the man's cheek with a wet, slimy slap. Then, with a roar of frustration that shook the alley walls, the creature pulled back its other fist, a swirling mass of black muscle and claws, and delivered a single, devastating punch. It wasn't a killing blow. It was controlled, precise. The punch landed squarely in the mugger's chest, lifting him off his feet and sending him flying backward into a metal dumpster with a deafening crash. The man was out cold before he even hit the bottom. The monster turned its head, its great white eyes fixing on the woman, who was huddled on the ground, shaking and sobbing with terror. It took a step towards her, and she screamed. That scream was the final catalyst Izuku needed. He wrestled back control, the monstrous features melting away, receding back into him like a tide of ink. He was left on his hands and knees, gasping for breath, his face pale and clammy. He was just Izuku Midoriya again. He looked at the unconscious mugger, then at the terrified woman. He had saved her, but he had also become the thing she feared most. He scrambled to his feet. Are you okay? He asked, his voice raw. The woman just stared at him, then at the dumpster, then back at him, her eyes filled with a terror that made his stomach churn. She nodded mutely, then gathered her purse and ran from the alley as if the devil himself were at her heels. Izuku was left alone with the silence, the stench of garbage, and the groaning of the unconscious criminal. He stumbled home, the argument in his head a raging firestorm. You tried to kill him. You tried to make me a murderer. It would have been efficient. He will trouble no one else. Your method was messy, imprecise, and left a witness who now fears you as much as she did him. I don't care. I will never, ever kill anyone. That is the line. If you cross it, I swear I will end this. I will jump off a roof for real, and we can both die together. The threat felt real, heavy with the memory of that afternoon. It was the only leverage he had. There was a long, thoughtful silence from the symbiote. It seemed to be processing the sheer, stubborn finality of his will. Your self-destructive tendencies are a powerful negotiating tool, Izuku Midoriya. It finally conceded, its tone grudging and sour. Very well. We will adhere to your arbitrary moral code. No killing. A dark chuckle resonated in his mind. But we make no promises about permanent maiming. And if they will not fear the hero, then they will learn to fear the monster. Is this acceptable? Izuku thought of the mugger's terrified face, the woman's scream. Fear was a tool, too. A dangerous one, but maybe a necessary one. He was not all might. He couldn't win people over with a dazzling smile, but maybe he could scare evil into hiding. Fine, Izuku whispered to the empty street. No killing. But they will learn to fear us. The next 10 months passed in a blur of intense, secret training. Every morning before school and every evening after, Izuku was at Dagoba Beach. But he wasn't just training, he was cleaning. Using the symbiote's strength, he cleared away the mountains of trash, a task that would have taken him years on his own. It was his penance and his training ground. He developed a seamless, fluid fighting style, blending his analytical predictions with the symbiote's savage, unpredictable power. He learned to form shields, blades, and webs of black tendrils. His control grew, as did his grocery bill. His mother was just happy he was finally filling out. He was no longer the frail, timid boy who cried at every confrontation. He was calm, focused, and carried a quiet confidence that bordered on unnerving. Bakugo still tried to taunt him, but the insults no longer had any sting. It was hard to be intimidated by a boy with firecracker palms when you had a literal monster living inside you that constantly offered helpful, murderous suggestions on how to deal with him. Finally, the day arrived. The day of the UA High School entrance exam. Izuku stood before the colossal gates of his dream school. A year ago, he would have been a trembling, anxiety-ridden mess. Today, he was a pillar of calm. He looked different, still lean, but the years of slouching were gone. He stood tall, his muscles carrying a wiry, dense strength that his uniform couldn't completely hide. He felt the familiar, low hum of the symbiote's consciousness, a coiled serpent of power waiting in the depths of his being. It was watching the other applicants through his eyes, its assessment swift and merciless. So many peacocks, Venom sneered in his mind. Puffing up their chests, displaying their pathetic little tricks. They have no idea what true power is. They are children with playthings. Izuku felt a small smile touch his lips. He ignored the stares of the other students, some of whom recognized him as the quirkless kid from Aldera. He ignored Bakugo, who was glaring at him with an expression of utter, confused fury. None of them mattered right now. He took a deep breath, the cool morning air filling his lungs. This was it. The first step. He was not here to pass. He was here to dominate. He was here to show them all, the judges, the other students, All Might, the whole world, what a real hero could do. The voice in his head rumbled, sharing his anticipation, its hunger no longer for chocolate, but for glory. Let us begin, Izuku. Let us show them a monster. The air in UA's massive orientation auditorium crackled with the nervous energy of 1,000 frayed synapses. Hundreds of aspiring heroes, the best of the best from every middle school in the region, sat packed together in the cavernous, dimly lit hall. The low murmur of anxious chatter was a physical presence, a hum you could feel in your teeth. Izuku Midoriya was an island of calm in that sea of anxiety. He sat straight-backed in his seat, his gaze fixed on the brightly lit stage. He wasn't fidgeting. His leg wasn't bouncing. His breathing was slow and even. This placid exterior was a carefully constructed dam holding back a roiling reservoir of power. Beneath his skin, the symbiote was a coiled spring, a low thrum of potential energy that resonated with his own anticipation. Such a cacophony, Venom's voice slid through his mind, dripping with disdain. The air is thick with the stench of their fear. They are prey, waiting for the slaughter to begin. Why do you wish to join this flock of shivering sheep? They're not sheep, Izuku thought back, his focus unwavering. They're competitors. And they're nervous because this means everything to them. Just like it means everything to us. Their everything is a trifle, Venom scoffed. Our everything is survival and dominance. There is no comparison. The lights on stage flared, and a familiar, bombastic voice cut through the auditorium like a lightning strike. What's up, UA candidates? Welcome to the main event. The pro-hero present Mike, clad in leather and sporting his signature gravity-defying hair, struck a pose under the spotlight. A wave of excited whispers and cheers rippled through the crowd. This one is loud, Venom noted with profound irritation. His power is vibration. Annoying, but potentially useful for disrupting solid matter. We could silence him permanently with a single, well-placed tendril down his throat. We are not silencing anyone. Izuku snapped back mentally, forcing himself not to flinch. Focus. This is the briefing. We need the rules. President Mike launched into an energetic explanation of the practical exam. It was a 10-minute mock battle in a massive, cityscape replica. The applicants would be divided into different battle centers and would have to fight against 3 types of robotic villains, each worth a different number of points. Think of it like a video game. President Mike yelled, striking another pose. You gotta use your quirks to blast those villains to Kingdom Come. But no attacking other competitors. That's a big no-no, you dig? A tall, broad-shouldered student with dark blue hair and glasses shot to his feet, his hand raised with military precision. Excuse me, sir, I have a question. Hit me. On the printout, there are 4 types of villains listed. If this is a misprint, it is a gross error on the part of Japan's most prestigious hero academy. He then swiveled, his arm chopping stiffly toward a figure in the crowd. And you, with the messy green hair. You have been muttering to yourself this entire time. It is distracting. If you are not taking this seriously, then you should leave. A spotlight swung to find Izuku. 100 pairs of eyes turned to stare at him. A year ago, this would have reduced him to a puddle of apologetic, stammering jelly. He would have turned beet red and wished for the floor to swallow him whole. Now, he simply met the taller boy's intense gaze. He didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He just stared back with a placid, unreadable expression. The silence stretched. The accuser, who Izuku recognized as an Ida from the esteemed hero family, seemed thrown off balance by the lack of a flustered reaction. Izuku offered a slow, deliberate nod. "My apologies," he said, his voice perfectly level and devoid of any nervousness. "I will be more considerate." He then broke eye contact and returned his gaze to the stage, the dismissal clear. He had nothing more to say to the boy. "He has an engine in his legs," Venom observed, a flicker of professional interest in its tone. "High-speed potential. But his joints will be a significant weak point. A simple, well-aimed tendril could cripple him. We should remember that." Ida, looking vaguely insulted and deeply confused by the encounter, sat back down. President Mike, meanwhile, laughed it off. All right, examinee 7111. Thanks for the shout-out. The fourth villain type is the arena trap. It's worth 0 points. Think of it as a massive obstacle to avoid. That's all I got for ya. Now I'll leave you with our school motto. As the great hero Napoleon Bonaparte once said, a true hero is someone who overcomes life's misfortunes. Now go beyond. Plus ultra. The students were herded onto buses and driven to their respective battle centers. Izuku found himself at Battle Center B. As he stepped out into the simulated city, the scale of it took his breath away. Skyscrapers, both real and holographic, towered over them. The streets were wide, the buildings intricately detailed. It felt like a real, living city, held in a state of suspended animation. He saw the girl from the auditorium, the one with the round, friendly face, nervously psyching herself up. He saw Ada, stretching with focused intensity. And then, he saw him. Katsuki Bakugo was standing a few feet away, stretching his arms. He caught Izuku's eye, and his face twisted into the familiar, ugly sneer. "What the hell are you doing here, Deku?" he growled, low enough that only Izuku could hear. "Did you really think you could get in just by writing in your stupid notebooks? Don't get in my way, or I'll kill you." Izuku just looked at him. He didn't cower. He didn't stammer. The fear that had been conditioned into him over a decade of torment was gone, burned away by the cold confidence of the creature living in his soul. "Don't worry, Kaken," Izuku replied, his voice calm and even. "I won't be in your way. I'll be far ahead of you." Bakugo's eyes widened, a flicker of shock quickly consumed by a surge of explosive fury. "What did you just say to me, you quirkless, and start?" President Mick's voice boomed from unseen speakers, shaking the very ground. The massive gates in front of them slid open. For a second, everyone stood frozen in confusion. "What are you waiting for?" the voice roared. "The test has begun. There are no countdowns in a real fight. Run! Run! Run!" The crowd of applicants surged forward in a chaotic stampede. All of them except Izuku. He remained perfectly still for 3 full seconds, his head tilted as if listening to a faraway sound. In reality, he and Venom were performing a high-speed scan of the immediate area. 3 one-pointers, 200 meters ahead, left alley, Venom reported. 2 two-pointers on the roof of the building to our right. A 3-pointer rounding the far corner. The herd is running straight, clustering together. Inefficient. We will go left. We hunt alone. Izuku's body coiled, and he exploded from a standing start. He wasn't just running, he was flowing. He moved with an unnerving, predatory grace, his feet barely seeming to touch the ground as he veered away from the main group and down a side street. He was a shadow detaching itself from the frantic mob. The first robot, a squat, green machine on a single large wheel, rolled into view, its red optical sensor swiveling to lock onto him. Target acquired, it droned, raising a pair of Gatling gun arms. Izuku didn't slow down. He didn't even break stride. As he charged forward, his right arm went rigid. The sleeve of his tracksuit tore as a wave of glistening black biomass surged down his limb. It didn't form a fist. It flattened, sharpened, and hardened, transforming his arm into a long, chitinous blade, wickedly curved and ending in a razor-sharp point. He ducked under the first volley of rubber bullets, the wind from their passage whistling past his ears. He closed the distance in a heartbeat. With a single, fluid upward slash, the obsidian blade sliced through the robot's torso. There was a horrifying shriek of shearing metal and a spray of viscous lubricants. The one-pointer split cleanly in two, its sensor flickering and dying before the pieces even hit the ground. 1 point, Izuku thought, the blade receding back into his arm as if it had never been there. He leaped onto the wall of the alley, his feet adhering to the brick for a split second, and used the momentum to launch himself onto a fire escape. 2 more one-pointers were below. He didn't even bother with a blade this time. 2 whip-like black tendrils, thin and impossibly fast, erupted from his back. They snapped down, wrapping around the robots' heads. Izuku landed on the ground, and with a sharp, brutal tug, he ripped their heads from their metal shoulders. The decapitated bodies staggered for a moment before collapsing in a heap of sparking wires. 3 points. More Venom purred in his head, the thrill of the hunt a palpable sensation. This is barely a warm-up. Their metal shells are like eggshells. Show us a real challenge. He could feel the eyes of the other applicants on him now. A girl whose quirk let her stretch her limbs like rubber had just rounded the corner, preparing to fight the robots he'd already dispatched. She froze mid-stretch, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and stark terror as she stared at the carnage, then at the quiet, green-haired boy standing calmly in the middle of it. Izuku ignored her. He could hear the heavy, clanking footsteps of a 2-pointer approaching from the main street. It was taller, more heavily armored, with powerful pincer arms. He dashed out to meet it. The robot lunged, its pincers snapping with enough force to crush steel. Izuku slid under the attack, his body moving with a liquid grace. As he passed beneath it, a dozen smaller, needle-sharp tendrils shot from his back, piercing the robot's leg joints and undercarriage. He rose to his feet behind it, and with a single mental command, the tendrils flexed, severing hydraulic lines and critical wiring. The 2-pointer seized up, its joints locking, and it toppled forward, crashing face first into the asphalt with a deafening clang. 5 points. He was a whirlwind of silent, efficient destruction. He didn't waste energy with grand, flashy moves. He was a surgeon, dismantling his targets with a terrifying precision that was far more unnerving than any wild explosion. A 3-pointer with tank treads and rocket launchers was disabled when Izuku formed a massive, shield-like gauntlet to absorb the rocket's impact, then used a powerful tendril to rip the entire launcher mechanism from its chassis and beat the robot into scrap metal with it. 8 points. Somewhere across the city, Bakugo was causing chaos. The constant, booming crack of his explosions echoed between the buildings. He was a force of nature, all fire and fury, blasting robots into oblivion. But with every robot he destroyed, his rage grew. Because every so often, he would catch a glimpse of Deku. The useless, quirkless Deku he'd known his whole life. Except it wasn't him. He saw a dark shape leap between 2 rooftops, a distance no normal human could clear. He saw a flash of black, and a 2-pointer on a distant street corner simply crumpled in on itself, crushed by some unseen force. He saw Deku moving through the chaos not with panic, but with a calm, predatory focus, and it was wrong. It was all wrong. What is that quirk? Bakugo roared to himself, blasting a 1-pointer to pieces with pure, unadulterated rage. Where did he get it? Was he hiding it all this time? That bastard, that lying, cheating bastard. Izuku, meanwhile, was keeping a running tally. 45 points. The initial wave of robots had been thinned out. The other applicants were starting to get their bearings, and points were becoming scarcer. The larger ones seemed to be concentrated toward the center of the arena, Venom observed. Logically, the highest concentration of points would be in the most dangerous area. We should proceed there, Izuku agreed. He used his tendrils to scale a 10-story building, climbing the sheer face with the ease of a spider. From the roof, he could survey the entire battleground. He saw pockets of fighting, flashes of ice and light, the glint of steel. and he saw a wide central plaza where several three-pointers were patrolling. He was about to leap when the ground began to shake. It started as a low, deep rumble that vibrated through the soles of his shoes. Then it grew into a ground-shaking tremor that rattled the windows of every building in the city. A collective gasp rose from all the applicants below. From the center of the plaza, casting a shadow that blotted out the sun, the zero-pointer rose. It was a monstrosity of engineering, a robot so colossal it made the skyscrapers around it look like children's toys. Its green armor was thick as a tank's, its single red eye glowed with malevolent energy, and its massive arms could level a city block with a single sweep. Panic. Pure, unadulterated panic erupted. "It's the zero-pointer!" Someone shrieked. "Run!" The students who had been fighting in the plaza turned and fled without a second thought. It was the smart move. The logical move. The machine was an obstacle, not a target. Engaging it was pointless. Izuku watched the exodus from his rooftop perch. He had plenty of points. He was almost certainly in. The test was nearly over. The smart thing to do was to stay put, wait out the clock, or at most, hunt for a few stray one-pointers on the periphery. The entity is too large. Venom's voice was a low, urgent hiss in his mind. Its power output is immense. We have no data on its structural weaknesses. Engaging it is an unnecessary risk to the host. Flee. Survival is paramount. Izuku was about to agree. He was about to turn and leap away. Then he heard a small, pained cry from the plaza below. Ow! His eyes snapped down. It was the girl with the round face. Ochako Uraraka. She had tripped during the panicked retreat, and her leg was now pinned under a huge slab of concrete, debris kicked up by the zero-pointer's emergence. She was trying desperately to push it off, but it was too heavy, and the zero-pointer was turning towards her. Its massive arm rose, its huge, multi-jointed hand reaching down, preparing to crush her into the pavement. Everything stopped. The world went silent. All Izuku could see was a terrified girl, trapped and helpless. All he could hear was All Might's voice echoing from that rooftop. "You can't be a hero." All he could feel was the phantom pain of a lifetime of being powerless, of standing by while others were hurt. But he wasn't powerless anymore. "Leave her," Venom commanded, its voice cold and logical. "Her fate is not our concern. Preserving the host is the only priority. This is not a fight we can win." A fire ignited in Izuku's soul, a defiant inferno that roared to life and pushed back against the symbiote's cold, alien pragmatism. For the first time, he wasn't just working with his partner, he was fighting it. No! The thought was a mental scream that made his own head ache. A hero saves people. That's the first rule. That's the only rule. Your emotional responses are a liability. You will get us both killed. The symbiote fought back, trying to force his muscles to turn, to leap away to safety. He felt a wave of dizziness, a nauseating vertigo as two wills warred for control of one body. "Then so be it," Izuku roared back in the confines of his own skull. "But I am not leaving her to die. This is my body. And I say we fight." He won. The symbiote, stunned by the sheer, indomitable force of his heroic spirit, recoiled. The resistance in his limbs vanished. The body was his to command. He didn't leap at the robot. He didn't charge. He did something far more audacious. He took a step back on the rooftop, planted his feet, and stomped down with all his might. The surface of the roof cracked under the force. But the impact was just a catalyst. From the soles of his shoes, thick, black, powerful tendrils erupted, not into the air, but down. They plunged into the concrete of the roof like living roots, burrowing deep into the building's superstructure, anchoring him to its very foundations. He became one with the skyscraper. Then, with a guttural roar that tore from his throat, he threw his arms wide. From his back, his shoulders, and his arms, not 2, not a dozen, but 50 thick, writhing tendrils of black biomass exploded into the air. They were not whips. They were pythons, thick as his own torso, and they moved with terrifying speed and purpose. They shot out across the plaza, not at the robot, but at the buildings surrounding it. Wham! Crack! Boom! The tendrils slammed into the concrete and steel facades of the neighboring skyscrapers, punching through walls and wrapping around support girders. In seconds, Izuku had become the epicenter of a colossal, black web. He had tethered himself to the entire city block. The zero-pointer's massive fist descended. Uraraka squeezed her eyes shut, a tear tracing a path through the grime on her cheek. Just inches from her, the world exploded in a net of living darkness. Izuku's tendrils snapped taut, forming an immense, intricate catch net directly in the path of the robot's fist. The impact was cataclysmic. The sound was not a clang of metal, but the deep, resonant thrum of 1,000 overstressed suspension cables snapping at once. The strain on Izuku's body was unimaginable. He was the anchor point for a force that could level buildings. His muscles screamed, his bones felt like they were about to turn to dust. Blood trickled from his nose and ears. The symbiote, forced into this insane plan, wrapped his entire body in a thick, protective layer of biomass, reinforcing his skeleton and straining to hold his joints together. The host's body is failing. Venom shrieked in his mind, its voice laced with something akin to panic. Tearing muscle. Micro-fractures in the bone. This is unsustainable. Just hold on. Izuku roared out loud, his voice a distorted, dual-toned snarl as the symbiote surfaced to protect him. He had caught the fist. The robot, its programming unable to comprehend this bizarre form of resistance, pushed harder. But it was pushing against the combined structural integrity of 4 skyscrapers, all of it channeled through the boy on the roof. And then, Izuku did the impossible. He didn't just hold the line. He fought back. My turn! He bellowed. With a final, agonizing scream of effort, he contracted every single tendril at once. He pulled. The buildings he was anchored to groaned, their windows shattering from the strain. He was using the skyscrapers themselves as leverage, turning the entire city block into a colossal slingshot. The zero-pointer, a machine weighing thousands of tons, was lifted from its feet. It was yanked forward, off balance, its massive body pulled through the air by the black web. Izuku, with a final, Herculean effort, redirected his pulling force, swinging the colossal machine in a devastating arc. The zero-pointer was not punched. It was hurled. It flew backward, tumbling end over end, and crashed into another skyscraper a full block away. The impact was apocalyptic. The building it hit crumbled, and the robot itself was a mangled, sparking wreck, its red eye flickering out for the last time. The tendrils, their purpose served, snapped back into Izuku's body with the sound of 100 bullwhips. The black biomass receded, revealing the boy underneath. He stood there for a single, triumphant second, a silhouette against the dust and smoke, before his legs gave out. He collapsed onto the rooftop, his body screaming in protest, every cell feeling like it was on fire. He was utterly and completely spent. Silence. A profound, stunned silence fell over the entire battle center. The other applicants stood frozen in the streets, their jaws agape, staring at the impossible scene. In the control booth, President Mike, for the first time in his public career, was speechless. He slowly lifted his sunglasses, his eyes wide with disbelief. The buzzer finally sounded, its shrill cry seeming timid and insignificant in the wake of what had just happened. "Tea time's up," President Mike stammered, his voice barely a squeak. The exam was over. In a dark observation room, a bank of monitors showed every angle of the carnage in Battle Center B. The mood was one of stunned reverence. "Whoa, what was that?" President Mick's voice, now back to its normal volume, yelled from a comms unit. "Did you guys see that? The kid with the messy hair. He took out the zero-pointer. He frickin' threw it." Cementos adjusted his blocky head. "The structural damage to Battle Center B is unprecedented. He used my buildings as leverage. The sheer tensile strength of that quirk is off the charts." Midnight fanned herself, a slow, intrigued smile on her face. And such ferocity. He was like a wild animal. I felt a shiver. Shota Aizawa, his face wrapped in his signature scarf, leaned forward, his tired eyes narrowed in intense scrutiny. "That's no simple quirk," he said, his voice a low, serious rasp that cut through the other's excitement. "A simple transformation or emitter quirk doesn't behave like that." He pointed a bandaged finger at a slow-motion replay on one of the screens. It showed Izuku on the roof, just before he collapsed. For a split second, as the black biomass receded, his face was distorted. His smile was too wide, his teeth too sharp, his eyes blank white patches. Look, Aizawa continued. The biomass. It moves with an intelligence separate from the user. It reacts to threats he hasn't even processed yet. It's defensive, predatory. It reinforces his body to withstand forces that should have turned him to paste. That's not a power the boy is just wielding. It's a power that's actively trying to keep him alive. It's parasitic, or symbiotic. At the head of the room, Principal Nizu, the small, white-furred creature with the brilliant mind, steepled his paws together, a wide, unnerving grin stretching across his muzzle. Oh, I quite agree, Aizawa. It's magnificently predatory. The sheer creativity of the solution. Not to destroy, but to use the environment to displace and neutralize. The strategic thinking mixed with such raw, monstrous power. He scored a solid 78 points from villains, but that last act, that was a rescue of the highest caliber. A beautiful, beautiful monster. What a fascinating new variable he will be. Only one person in the room was silent. Tashinori Yagi, in his skeletal form, stood in the shadows at the back of the room, his hand clutching his side where his old injury ached. He stared at the monitor showing Izuku's unconscious form being attended to by medics. He saw the face of the boy whose dreams he had personally, unequivocally crushed on that rooftop. The frail, quirkless, crying boy who he had told, with all the authority of the symbol of peace, that it was impossible. And he had just watched that same boy perform one of the most powerful, selfless, and outrageously heroic feats he had ever witnessed. He had done it with a dark, terrifying, seemingly villainous power, yet his motivation had been pure, untainted heroism. He had saved a life at extreme risk to his own, without a thought for points or personal glory. A profound, chilling cocktail of shock, guilt, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility washed over All Might. He had been so wrong. So terribly, blindly wrong. And now, this boy he had failed, was on a path he didn't understand, wielding a power that looked like it was torn from a nightmare. Young Midoriya. Tashinori whispered to himself, his voice thick with a storm of emotion. What are you? He knew then and there that his involvement with this boy's life was not over. It was just beginning. He had to know more. He had to understand. He had to keep a very, very close eye on Izuku Midoriya. The first day of school at UA High was less a dream come true and more a fever dream from which Izuku couldn't seem to wake. He stood in front of the colossal door of Class 1A, the bold red lettering seeming to buzz with a palpable energy. His hand rested on the cool metal of the handle, his heart thumping a steady, calm rhythm against his ribs, a stark contrast to the frantic, anxiety-fueled jackhammering it would have been performing just 10 months ago. He was nervous, but it was a different kind of nervousness now. It wasn't the fear of being inadequate, the terror of being discovered as a quirkless fraud. It was the tight, focused apprehension of a predator entering a new, unknown territory. He was nervous about keeping his secret, about reigning in the dark, hungry thing that lived coiled in his soul. This door is unnecessarily large, Venom's voice slid into his thoughts, a bored, critical counterpoint to the awe-inspiring scale of UA's architecture. A wasteful expenditure of resources. A more efficient, smaller entryway would suffice. This entire institution is built on theatricality rather than practicality. It's designed to be accessible for students with gigantification quirks, I think, Izuku reasoned, his analytical mind kicking in automatically. It's a symbol of UA's inclusivity, a symbol of their weakness. They cater to the inefficient. No matter. The occupants of this room are what concern us. Let us assess the competition. Taking a final, steadying breath, Izuku pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was already buzzing with the chatter of the nation's brightest young hero prospects. His eyes swept the room, cataloging the occupants. He saw the bespectacled boy from the exam, Ida, already attempting to enforce some form of decorum. He saw the friendly-faced girl, Uraraka, talking with a girl with pink skin and small horns. And then, he saw him. Katsuki Bakugo was leaning back in his chair, his feet propped up on his desk, the very picture of arrogant defiance. He looked up as Izuku entered, and his crimson eyes narrowed into slits of pure venom. The ambient noise in the room seemed to fade as a palpable tension snapped into place between them. Bakugo kicked his feet off the desk and stood up, his movements sharp and aggressive. He stalked toward Izuku, his palms already beginning to smoke with tiny, crackling explosions. Deku, he snarled, the name a curse on his lips. You. I don't know what kind of cheap trick you pulled to pass that exam, but don't think for a second you're fooling me. You're a pebble, a worthless, quirkless nobody. I'm gonna find out what your deal is, and I'm gonna crush you. The entire class fell silent, all eyes turning to the confrontation. This was the moment Izuku had been dreading and, in a strange way, anticipating. The first test of his new self. The old Izuku would have flinched, stammered, and backed away, apologizing for his own existence. The new Izuku simply stood his ground, his expression calm, almost placid. He met Bakugo's furious glare without a trace of fear. This one is all noise and impotent rage, Venom observed with chilling detachment. His quirk is powerful but lacks finesse. His emotional state is a glaring weakness. He telegraphs his every move. We could dislocate both of his arms and shatter his kneecaps before his brain could even register the command to detonate. Allow us. It would be educational for him. No, Izuku commanded, his will a solid wall against the symbiote's murderous impulse. Stand down. Let me handle this. Hello, Kaken, Izuku said, his voice quiet but carrying clearly in the silent room. I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to learn how to be a hero. Just like everyone else. His complete lack of fear, his utter refusal to be intimidated, was more effective than any counter-threat. It was like Bakugo had thrown a punch and hit a ghost. He was left off balance, his rage having no purchase. Don't you Kaken me, you bastard! Bakugo roared, raising a sparking hand. Are you looking down on me? If you're going to be hunting for friends, then you can leave. The voice was tired, monotone, and came from a yellow sleeping bag lying on the floor behind Izuku. The class gasped as a man with long, unkempt black hair and bloodshot eyes slowly unzipped himself, and rose to his feet like a weary zombie. It was Shota Aizawa, the pro-hero eraserhead, their homeroom teacher. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down, Aizawa said, his gaze sweeping across them with palpable boredom. That's irrational. Life is short. He rummaged in his sleeping bag and pulled out a set of blue and white UA gym uniforms. Put these on and meet me on the field outside. We're having a quirk apprehension test. The walk to the changing rooms and out onto the field was a blur of confused and indignant whispers. A quirk test on the first day. What about the entrance ceremony? Or orientation? Izuku ignored them. He simply changed, his movements economical and precise, his mind already running calculations. Aizawa was an underground hero. He valued efficiency, logic, and results over ceremony. This wasn't just a test, it was a filter. He was trying to see who was serious. This teacher is more interesting than the loud one, Venom noted. He observes. He analyzes. He understands that weakness must be purged. We approve of his methods. His quirk, however, the ability to nullify the powers of others. It could be problematic for us. You mean it could affect you? Izuku asked, a flicker of concern piercing his calm. Uncertain. Our nature is not a quirk in the biological sense of this world. We are a separate entity. His power might sever my connection to you, rendering us both vulnerable. Or it might do nothing at all. Avoid his direct line of sight whenever possible. An unknown variable is an unacceptable risk. On the field, Aizawa held up a device that looked like a souped-up smartphone. Bakugo, he said, his voice flat. You got the highest score on the practical exam. In middle school, what was your farthest softball throw? 67 meters, Bakugo grunted. Try it with your quirk, Aizawa said, tossing him a softball. Do whatever you want as long as you stay in the circle. Hurry up. Bakugo grinned, a feral, wolfish expression. He wound up, and with a thunderous explosion that ripped through the air, he launched the ball. Die! He screamed, the word echoing across the field. The ball became a comet, disappearing into the sky. Aizawa looked down at his device. A moment later he held it up. It read, 705.2 meters. The class erupted in excited gasps. 705 meters? Seriously? This looks so fun. We can use our quirks as much as we want. Aizawa's tired expression hardened into something dangerous. A cold, unnerving grin spread across his face. Fun, you say? He said, his voice dropping to a low, threatening tone. So you were planning to spend the next 3 years here having a good time? What about becoming heroes? He paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. All right. New rule. The student who ranks last in total points will be judged to have no potential, and will be expelled immediately. Panic. Pure, unadulterated panic swept through the class. The fun, exciting atmosphere evaporated, replaced by the cold, sharp tang of fear. Excellent, Venom purred with genuine approval. Cull the weak. Survival of the fittest. This is the natural order. We will not be last. We will be first. The tests began. The 50-meter dash. Ida, with the engines in his calves, was a blur, finishing in just over 3 seconds. Bakugo used his explosions to propel himself like a rocket. Izuku's turn came. He stepped up to the line, his expression unreadable. He didn't want to reveal the full, monstrous nature of his power. Not yet. He had to make it look like a versatile, but understandable, transformation quirk. He had discussed this with Venom at length. Brute force was for fools. Control and deception were the weapons of a true predator. The starting pistol fired. For the first 10 meters, Izuku just ran, his own unenhanced speed decent but not spectacular. Then, he let the symbiote work, not with overt tendrils or blades, but with subtle, internal augmentation. Thin, black filaments of biomass shot through his legs, reinforcing his muscles and tendons, making them contract and release with superhuman efficiency. To an outside observer, it just looked like an incredible burst of speed. He crossed the line in 4.13 seconds, a phenomenal time that placed him near the top. He didn't use any flashy effects, which, in its own way, was even more unsettling to those watching. Next was the grip strength test. He walked up to the machine, took the handle, and squeezed. Do not simply crush it, Venom advised. Apply pressure gradually. Simulate the strengthening of a physical enhancement quirk, not the absolute force of an external entity. Deception is key. The digital readout climbed rapidly, past the scores of the students with strength-enhancing quirks, past the superhuman score of a 6-armed student named Shoji, and kept going until it beeped and displayed an error message. He had maxed it out. He set it down without a word and stepped back, ignoring the stunned silence. The standing long jump. He cleared the entire sandbox with a single, powerful leap, again augmented by the internal reinforcement of the symbiote. The side-to-side steps. He moved in a fluid, almost liquid blur, his body shifting with an unnatural grace that made him seem like he was everywhere at once. He was dominating every test, but in a quiet, understated way that was more unnerving than Bakugo's loud explosions. He was an enigma, a silent predator moving among them, and the other students began to give him a wide berth, whispering amongst themselves. Then came the ball throw. This was his chance to make a real statement. He stepped into the circle, the familiar weight of the softball in his hand. He could see Aizawa watching him intently, his dark eyes narrowed, searching for the truth behind his power. He could feel Bakugo's glare burning into his back, a palpable wave of hatred. All Might is watching, Venom whispered, its senses extending far beyond Izuku's own. From a window in the main building. The broken man. He is observing you. Show him. Show him the power he denied. Show him the fool he was. Izuku took a deep breath. He didn't want to just throw it. He wanted to do something that demonstrated control as well as power. He wound up his arm, and as it came forward, the symbiote exploded into action. Instead of just covering his arm, a thick, powerful tendril of black biomass erupted from his shoulder blades. It was not a whip, but a thick, muscular limb. It moved with blinding speed, wrapping around his throwing arm from shoulder to wrist, reinforcing it, turning it into a biological piston. At the same time, another set of tendrils shot out from his feet, anchoring him to the ground, bracing him for the recoil. He threw. The symbiote tendril contracted with incredible force, acting like a medieval trebuchet, slinging his arm forward at a speed that broke the sound barrier. Crack boom! The sonic boom was deafening. The ball vanished. It didn't just fly, it was erased from the sky. The sheer force of the throw created a spiraling vortex of wind that kicked up a massive cloud of dust, momentarily obscuring him from view. The class was stunned into silence. Even Bakugo was speechless, his jaw hanging slightly open. Aizawa lowered his phone, his eyes wide behind his goggles. He held it up for the class to see. The numbers glowed ominously on the screen. 705.3 meters. He had beaten Bakugo. By 1/10 of a meter. It was a deliberate, calculated insult. A declaration that not only was he on Bakugo's level, but he was just slightly, effortlessly, better. Aizawa's tired face broke into a wide, predatory grin, the same one he'd worn when he announced the expulsion rule. He was looking at Izuku, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something other than suspicion in his eyes. It was respect. The final scores were posted. Izuku Midoriya was in first place. At the bottom of the list, in 20th place, was a short, purple-haired boy named Minoru Mineta. And I was lying about the expulsion, Aizawa said, the grin vanishing as if it had never been there. It was a rational deception to draw out your best performances. The class erupted in a mixture of relieved cries and indignant shouts. Well, of course it was a lie, a tall girl with a black ponytail, Momo Yayorozu said with a sigh. It was obvious. Aizawa ignored them all, his gaze fixed on Izuku. He walked over, stopping just in front of him. The other students quieted, sensing the gravity of the moment. Midoriya, Aizawa said, his voice low. A word. He led Izuku away from the others, toward the edge of the training field. Izuku's heart began to beat a little faster. He suspects, Venom warned. His gaze is penetrating. Be cautious. Reveal nothing. Aizawa stopped and turned, his dark, tired eyes boring into Izuku's. I've never seen a quirk like yours, he began, his tone devoid of any emotion. It's not registered under your name. In fact, until 10 months ago, your file listed you as quirkless. So, what is it? This was the moment. The lie they had prepared. It's a recent manifestation, sir, Izuku said, his voice steady. He had rehearsed this. The doctors called it a symbiotic biomass. It was dormant. The stress of the sludge villain incident. They think it triggered its activation. Aizawa's expression didn't change. A dormant quirk that manifested with this level of control and power in under a year. Unlikely. Your power, it seems to think. It reacts to protect you. During the exam, it anchored you, reinforced you. It made decisions. A power that isn't fully under its user's control is not a tool. It's a liability. A wild dog that will eventually turn on its master. Izuku met his teacher's gaze without flinching. It's a part of me, sir. I am in control. Are you? Aizawa took a step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Because from where I'm standing, it looks less like you have a quirk, and more like a quirk has you. I don't care what you call it, but know this. I will be watching you. Every moment. And if I see any sign, any hint that you are not the one in charge, I will end it. I will expel you, and I will personally see to it that you are never allowed near a hero course again. Do you understand me? The threat was absolute. Cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. Izuku nodded slowly. I understand, sir. Good, Aizawa said. He turned and walked away, his scarf billowing behind him. Get your syllabus from the classroom. Dismissed. As Izuku walked back toward the main building, the symbiote's voice was a low, dangerous growl in his mind. He is a threat. His suspicion is a liability we cannot afford. We should eliminate him. An unfortunate accident during his nighttime patrols. No one would ever know. Absolutely not. Izuku shot back, his will like iron. He's my teacher. And he's right to be suspicious. It's our job to prove him wrong. We do that by being the best student here, not by murdering our homeroom teacher. Your morality is a cage, Izuku Midoriya. It's what makes me a hero, Izuku countered. And don't you forget it. The rest of the day was a blur of normal high school activities that felt bizarrely out of place after the morning's intensity. English with President Mike, lunch in the massive cafeteria, and then, finally, the class everyone had been waiting for, hero basic training. The door to the classroom slammed open, and a familiar, booming voice filled the room. "I am here." Coming through the door like a normal person, All Might, in his magnificent silver-aged costume, strode into the room, his permanent smile radiating pure power and charisma. The class erupted in a cacophony of starstruck awe. Izuku's reaction was more complicated. A part of him, the little boy who had worshipped the hero his whole life, felt a thrill. But a larger, colder part of him, the part that was intertwined with Venom, felt nothing but a cool, analytical curiosity. The broken man, in his final, glorious form, Venom mused. So much power. A sun, burning itself out. He is a dying star. We must learn the secret of his strength. It could sustain us for centuries. All Might announced that their first class would be indoor combat training. He pressed a button, and sections of the wall slid open, revealing cases filled with numbered briefcases. "These are the costumes you designed based on your quirk registration forms. Get changed and meet me at ground beta." Izuku found his case, number 17. He had designed his costume with Venom's input, a process that had been a strange and sometimes morbid negotiation. His initial design had been a bright green jumpsuit with a huge, slightly deranged smile, a clear homage to All Might. Venom had vetoed it immediately. "Absolutely not. We are creatures of darkness and shadow. We will not be adorned in the color of grass and optimism. Black. It must be black. And the smile is good, but it needs more teeth." The resulting costume was a compromise. It was a full-body suit of dark, forest green, almost black, made of a durable, tear-resistant fabric. It was accented with black armor plates on his chest, shoulders, and legs. He wore sturdy, steel-toed red combat boots, a nod to his old sneakers. The defining feature was the mask. It was a black half-mask that covered the lower half of his face, with a built-in respirator. It was sleek and functional, but when he drew his lips back, the mask was designed to look like it was stretching into a wide, jagged, toothy grin, a terrifying homage to both his new partner and his old idol. When Class 1A assembled in ground beta, clad in their new costumes, they looked like a page from a comic book come to life. "They say the clothes make the hero, and you all look like the real deal." All Might boomed. "Now, let's get down to business." He explained the exercise, a 2-on-2 battle. One team would be the heroes, the other the villains. The villains would be guarding a fake nuclear weapon inside a building, and the heroes would have to either capture the bomb or incapacitate both villains within the time limit. The teams were drawn by lottery. Izuku watched as the names were pulled. Uraraka was paired with him. Team A. He let out a small sigh of relief. She seemed kind. Manageable. Then came their opponents. Team D. Tenya Ida, and Katsuki Bakugo. A chill, colder than any symbiote-induced sensation, ran down Izuku's spine. All Might, for all his heroic bluster, seemed oblivious to the powder keg he had just created. But Izuku knew, this wasn't going to be a training exercise. For Bakugo, this was going to be a war. As they prepared to enter the building, Uraraka bounced on the balls of her feet, her bubbly personality a stark contrast to Izuku's grim focus. "Wow, I'm paired with the guy who came in first. This is so cool. You were amazing this morning, Midoriya. Your quirk is awesome. It's like you have this monster inside you." Izuku flinched at her choice of words. "Something like that," he mumbled, looking over the building schematics All Might had given them. "She is perceptive," Venom noted. "Her quirk nullifies gravity. Useful for mobility, but useless in direct combat against us. She will be a useful distraction, nothing more. The explosive one is the true threat. He will not follow the exercise's parameters. He will come for us, and he will come to maim." "I have a plan," Izuku said to Uraraka, his voice low and serious. "Bakugo will ignore you. He'll come straight for me. He sees this as a personal fight. While I keep him busy, you need to find the bomb. Ida is fast, but he's methodical. He'll be guarding the weapon directly. You have a chance to outmaneuver him while he's focused on the objective. Can you do that?" Uraraka looked a little taken aback by his sudden intensity, but she nodded firmly. "You got it. Leave it to me." The buzzer sounded, and they entered the building. It was a labyrinth of concrete hallways and empty rooms. Izuku moved with a silent, predatory grace, his senses heightened by the symbiote. "He is close," Venom whispered. "Around the next corner." His sweat smells of nitroglycerin and rage. "He is an animal. Let us put him down like one." They rounded the corner, and Bakugo was there, just as predicted. He didn't say a word. He just lunged, his right hand already sparking, a massive explosion erupting from his palm. "I've got you now, Deku!" The explosion filled the hallway with blinding light and thunderous noise. But it hit nothing. Izuku was already gone. In the split second it took for Bakugo's nerves to fire, Izuku had reacted. A tendril had shot out, adhering to the ceiling, and yanked him into the air, swinging him clean over Bakugo's head. He landed silently behind him as Bakugo stared at the smoking crater he'd blasted in the wall. "You always lead with a big right hook, Kaken," Izuku said, his voice calm. "You're predictable." Bakugo spun around, his face a mask of incandescent fury. You dodged me?" This was the moment. The culmination of a decade of abuse, of being looked down upon, of being called worthless. The symbiote was singing in his blood, begging to be unleashed, to tear this arrogant fool limb from limb. The rage it felt was a reflection of the deep, buried resentment Izuku had carried for years. The pressure inside him was immense. Bakugo's relentless taunts, the explosions, the raw, visceral hatred aimed at him, it was all fuel. A switch in his mind, worn thin by years of straying, began to flip. Aizawa's warning echoed in his ears. A wild dog that will eventually turn on its master. Bakugo charged again, a series of smaller, rapid-fire explosions propelling him forward. Izuku flowed around the attacks, his body moving with an unnatural fluidity. He wasn't just dodging. He was a ghost, a shadow that Bakugo's attacks passed straight through. "Stand still and fight me!" Bakugo screamed, his frustration mounting. And then, as Bakugo unleashed another massive explosion, Izuku decided he was done dodging. He didn't form a shield. He didn't leap away. He met the attack head-on. His right arm shot forward, a black, clawed gauntlet forming around it in an instant. He didn't block the explosion. He plunged his hand into it. The symbiote armor absorbed the brunt of the kinetic and thermal energy, and his clawed fingers closed around Bakugo's wrist in an iron grip. The explosion died. The hallway fell silent. Bakugo stared in shock at his captured hand, then up at Izuku's face. The green-haired boy's expression was no longer calm. His eyes, visible above his mask, had lost their familiar green hue. They were wide, stark white pools of cold, alien fury. A low, guttural growl, a sound that was both human and not, rumbled in his chest. His mask seemed to stretch into a horrifying, fanged grin, the material contorting as the symbiote surfaced. Bakugo's heart hammered in his chest. For the first time in his life, looking at the boy he had always called Deku, he felt a sliver of genuine, primal fear. This wasn't the weak, crying child he had tormented. This was something else. Something older and far more dangerous. The chapter ended on Bakugo's terrified expression as Izuku leaned in close, his voice a distorted, dual-toned whisper that echoed with the promise of long-overdue retribution. "My turn."